what's up, everybody? Welcome to Creative Mood. My name is Sacha Omer. I'm your host. I'm a Montreal artist. What's the speech again in English? I don't do enough of these in English. It doesn't matter. I'm a musician. I'm from Montreal. That's what's up. I always enjoy doing episodes in English. I don't do enough of them. Let's get right into it. I was made aware of Hua Li by one of our mutual friends, Gayance, when they collaborated on one of their songs, on one of Gayance's songs, should I say. And I've been intrigued by this person ever since. I think she's really cool. She has a unique flavor, and this is something that is desperately needed for me in Montreal. I love her music. I love her energy. I love what she's putting out there. And God, I love when everything I love about an artist is matched by how eloquent and smart and open they are in conversation. And today is certainly no different, no exception, should I say. So she has a big background. I really loved discovering this about her. I really loved connecting all those dots. I hope you will too. This was quite a long episode. This is 2 hours. I don't usually make 2-hour episodes. So this is a testament to the conversation. Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, was it too deep, not deep enough? Was it like going off on tangents for too long? And then I remind myself that you guys listen to those things while you wash your dishes or you're walking the dog or whatever it is. So for most of the podcast, it's just a conversation about her life, about her upbringing, about what she believes in, her thoughts. And then towards the end, we do what I usually do, is there's a stem breakdown of her song off of her new album that's coming up. I believe the album will be out by the time I put this episode out, so excuse me for botching the timeline. Now, I have papers with stuff on it. Where is it? There it is. Let's go. What am I looking at? The album is titled Ripe Fruit Falls, But Not in Your Mouth. And I really love that title. It's a long title. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? You see, I don't do enough of these in English. It evokes a lot of images, is what I'm trying to say. The song that we're breaking down, of course, I should mention, is called In the Fall. I'm going to leave it at that. Before I go, I want to talk about one of my sponsors. It's called Épices de Cru. So in French, for those that don't speak French, they sell whole spices and spice blends. They are located in Montreal at Marché Jean Talon Market. If you go on their online store, you can purchase spices from them directly and use the promo code EPICES10. As I'm doing this episode, I emailed them earlier and I said, I'm going to need a code in English so that people can use the promo code. You should be seeing on the screen exactly what this is. It's a couscous blend, and I want to share with you that for me, this is not just a sponsorship of people giving me money and me not caring about this product. I'm Turkish. Spices are part of my life, and it is for many cultures. I've been purchasing my products from this company for 15 years now, and they've been in business for a little over 20 years. So really, I do feel a very big sense of attachment to this brand, to this business. I really love them. They are one of the best spice pushers, if you will, in the business. So if you also, like me, like spices and you want quality spices, they wouldn't even have to pay me for me to advertise how good they are. I'm gonna leave you by saying that in the episode description, on your Spotify, on your Apple, on YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening, there's a description, and in that description are my socials and whoAH-lee's socials. And it is very important to both her and I that you follow the podcast, that you follow her on Spotify, on Instagram. I don't know why some people don't mention it. Maybe they think it's not cool. I don't care. It makes a really big difference in artists' lives when you follow on our socials. That is, for example, how I manage to get my sponsors. If they see no followers, they're like, you know what, hell with this guy. And, I like what I do. You can also buy merch on my store. You can support me on Patreon, and you can buy her merch as well on her website. It's all on her Instagram. Thank you very much for the trust, Hua Li. It was a pleasure meeting you. I was really looking forward to it for a few weeks. I think you're amazingly talented. I love your album, and I'm very happy that I got to meet you. That's it. Have a good day, guys. I don't know. But shout out to a Pony, actually. She also has the little tutu there that she made this. This is the first one. She's launching it on Friday.
Okay.
And it's called Kinzu. It's a broken heart. Yeah. It's a cute, no? There you go. So she gave it to me. So shout out to you, my friend, for this beautiful gift and the penises. So I want to start with the basic thing of how to say your name, your proper name.
Hua Li.
Hua Li.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
I read it in your documents, and I thought that was very cool that you would say, for reference, this is how you say it.
Yes. Well, people get it wrong all the time.
I bet.
So.
Yeah. But I think it's cool because sometimes people are afraid or shy to, insist or just sort of clarify these kinds of touchy issues because they feel maybe they don't want to bother or divide, or, it's like, oh, in case somebody doesn't play my music or something because of me being genuine, blah, blah, blah.
That would be very strange, I think, if somebody chose to not play my music because I told them how to say my name. For me, choosing to use my given name in Mandarin was a very important piece of starting this project and laying claim to that side of me. It's very much an act of anti-assimilation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a word for me. I want people to know that not only is that my artist name, but that's the name that my family calls me.
Yeah.
And you should say it right. They
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's cool. Like it really, I should say that I'm also in a similar process right now with an upcoming EP of sort of, I don't know if reclaiming is the right word, but definitely claiming my, my ethnic background.
Mm-hmm.
And because we live in Quebec, this is a conversation that I don't have often.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not surrounded with that many people who go through those kinds of reflections.
Right. I think it's interesting because, are you born and raised here?
I am born and raised here. Are you?
Well, not here in Montreal, but in Canada, yes.
Gotcha.
And I think people don't realize how much as children there's a subtle push toward assimilation. It's not overt by any means, but there's the sense of like, kids just want to fit in. If you are a minority amongst a dominant culture, there is going to be a natural impulse to want to be involved in that culture and be accepted by your peers.
Mm-hmm.
So that often means simplifying things.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm also half white, and I have a given name in English that's also very meaningful to me. But it does seem it seems a little like schizophrenic in a way that as a child,
Yeah.
I would go to school every day and I would be Peggy Hogan, and then I would come home and I would speak Mandarin all day, and no one called me that name.
Right.
My dad called me Peggy sometimes, and he's the one that gave me that name.
Right.
But generally speaking, especially amongst the women in my family, no one called me Peggy.
Gotcha.
So there was always a sense of a split identity my whole life growing up, and reconciling, well, am I only Chinese at home? or am I Chinese in the public sphere, and what does it mean to be Chinese in the public sphere?
Yeah. Right. Do you still, are all those things still present today in you?
I think I feel more integrated.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a great impetus, I think, for trying to make make a claim to my Chineseness publicly had to do with moving here, because suddenly I didn't have that Chinese space in the home.
Right.
I
So you're
was
more out there, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I was alone and I didn't have anyone to speak Mandarin to. My Mandarin got really bad my
Really?
first few years in Montreal. Like, I really had to remember to stay up on it and call my parents regularly
Wow.
and watch Chinese television just to get the input. Like, I would go home and I would struggle with words with my mother. And I'm illiterate in Chinese, so it's it became this thing where it was like, wow, I'm really acutely aware of how quickly I could lose my grasp
Mm-hmm.
on my language facility, my connection to my culture, if I'm alone trying to keep this contained in the home
Right.
space. Um, in recent years, like, I've met a lot more Chinese people here, which is also great, and I
Mm-hmm.
have people I can speak Mandarin to
That
outside
matters
of
to
my
you?
family life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so scared of losing that language.
Mm-hmm.
The maintenance of it is very important to me.
Right.
So that's a big part of why I do feel more integrated now, because of even little things like, this is my name, this is how you say it.
Yeah.
When I'm on a bill, generally I'll ask people to include the Chinese characters, so that it's normalized and emphasized. Like, part of it for me is that eventually I would like people to see the characters of Hua Li without the English letters next to it, and
Right.
be able to say, "Oh, I know what that is."
I hear you. Okay, cool. Man, I think that you're highlighting to me that something that I suffer from is that I don't speak Turkish.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I know, but you're certainly, you're not the first person to highlight the fact that, like, keeping up on the language is a thing. And I've thought about it, but like what you just said also is I have no one to speak Turkish to.
Right. Which makes it challenging.
It does. Like, I
Um,
mean, learning a language is quite the effort, and if you don't practice.
mhm.
The interesting thing about podcasting is that I like the deconstructed form.
Mm.
You know, there's a bit of a pressure to be having really profound conversations at like go. There's like 15 people, lighting is perfect, everything's perfect. I feel it's not conducive with like mainstream media to have real big conversations.
Right. At the same time, all I ever want to do is have real big conversations. So.
I hear you. I hear you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Victoria, BC.
Okay, right on. And both your parents still live there?
My father passed away, unfortunately, in 2020.
Okay,
But my mother is still there. Yes.
gotcha. And your father is white,
Yes.
and your mother is
Chinese.
Chinese.
Yes.
And what did your parents do for a living?
My father was a early software developer.
Okay,
He was a linguist, or
okay,
trying to be a linguist. It's a very abstract job.
sure.
And he was kind of poached in that first generation of software developers because he understood language
Right.
and the components of syntax, and so a lot of the very early writers of code did tend to have a linguistic or language background.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, it makes sense, but I never.
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, software languages are interesting because they are languages like anything else, except that there's very straightforward rules. Like, they're very
Mhm.
easy to learn for people who already understand the systems of learning language.
Right. Right. And what does your mom do
Uh,
or did?
well, my mom is a famous de-skilled immigrant,
what
one
does
of the many.
what does that mean?
Well, when you come to Canada from
Oh,
many of the
de-skilled. I'm sorry.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Gotcha.
So she was a genetic biologist in China, and she gave up her career to come to Canada and did all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, jobs. Gotcha.
Worked in a convenience store for a while. Eventually, she started like a tailoring business, and she's a very, very talented tailor.
Can you believe that?
It is wild.
It blows my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you not harbor resentment?
That's what's amazing, actually, is that I assumed my whole life that she harbored resentment around that.
Right.
And a couple years ago, I asked her I asked her outright about it. Just framing it as, I mean, for context, she went to university in the first year after universities reopened in China post-Cultural Revolution. So the landscape at this time is that there has been no real education, real functional education in the country for almost 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
It's all propaganda.
Right.
You learn the Red Book, you learn the principles of the party, and that's about it. There's no real schooling outside of that. When universities reopened, they reopened in the traditional way, which is that you write a very challenging entrance exam, and then they give you some options in terms of sort of the scholastic tier of school that you would be appropriate for. So it was very challenging for those first cohorts,
right,
in order to enter, because they hadn't had traditional schooling.
There's no antécédent, or what do you call it?
Yes, and oh, now I've forgotten.
Antecedent. Yeah, there's no prior.
Yes,
There's no prior.
there's no
should we say.
president.
Precedent. Yes.
Uh,
That's wild.
yes, so it was all self-study,
Mhm.
right? And so in order to enter an elite university, someone would have had to have self-studied all of those things in order to be prepared to write the entrance exam.
Right. That makes no sense.
I mean, it was just a gap, right? So they still wanted to create the standards
Mhm.
of a university, and they didn't want to compromise on that,
Right.
which in some ways I understand.
Mhm.
But there was no real support in order for people to meet those standards.
Right.
As a result, those first few cohorts that entered universities in that post-Cultural Revolution era are largely considered by any Chinese person, especially of that generation, to be the intelligentsia. They are,
I
just
understand.
hyper.
The standard, if you will, naturally.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I get it. Okay, very interesting.
So my mother was part of this elite group of thinkers,
Mhm.
of self-studying, incredibly ambitious, incredibly self-motivated, scholastic individuals.
Okay.
So I, of course, assumed that she would be totally unhappy with her life in Canada as a result.
It's not hard to imagine.
Right. But when I asked her about it, she told me that, in fact, because she did so much essentially illegal studying during her youth, she was reading books that were banned,
Right.
and absorbing knowledge that was very taboo in the
Mhm.
time. She always felt that she wanted more than what China was able to offer her.
Right.
And despite all of the propaganda that she was taught about the West, she also was absorbing these ideas of, like, even something simple like, in the West, when couples get together, they live together before they get married.
Mhm.
And she thought that was a very good idea to know if you would
Fit with someone. Yeah, sure.
domestically. And people thought that was just so unbelievably progressive at that time.
I think it's hard to imagine the world she comes from, in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So she really wanted to experience the sense of freedom that she believed that the West offered.
Mhm.
And it's interesting for me as a hypercritical, deeply left-leaning individual who grew up in the West. It's interesting to hear someone other and actually have so much gratitude for something that I view as a situation that took so much away from her.
That's wisdom, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it also just goes to show, I think there's nothing wrong with being critical But it's also important to keep in mind the great deal of privilege we do have here.
Of course.
You know, I don't think that there's anything incomprehensible about why people in other places in the world would want to come here.
Not at all. No, no, for sure. I mean, my dad left his country because of the war,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so
Mm-hmm.
like this is an old story at this point, you know what I mean? People being displaced. And it's funny how our parents can be so cool in the face of adversity.
Yes.
It's very inspiring. And
Yes.
it does sort of make a demarcation between me and some of my friends that are born here.
Mm-hmm.
Just that in itself is kind of a big deal.
Right.
And it seems like your parents were both like very academic, but at the same time,
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go on.
no, it's okay.
At the same time, what?
At the same time, I would also say that like your father was definitely in a creative field,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. I would say they're both quite creative in certain senses.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's a very talented dancer and used to be a singer.
Okay.
She was in the what did they call that? I forget now. Basically like the youth propaganda squad.
Youth for Communism.
Yeah. The Red
Really?
Youth or something like that. You know, so she would be part of these like
I'm laughing. It's
morality
not funny.
plays. No,
but
I
yeah.
mean
it's just
it's
yeah.
real.
Yeah.
You know, so she was one of the
Okay.
the members of that would do the morality plays and perform and entertain the stories that Mao's wife would create for the people.
I'm happy that we're talking about it because we don't talk enough about this stuff. It's wild.
Yes.
You know? Okay, so your mom was like definitely a creative person, an artist.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, she loves math and science, but is definitely operating in that upper level
Mm-hmm.
of these fields where, you know, what's interesting for her is the problem solving piece and the
Right.
discovery piece. It's not the you know, she's wildly unpragmatic in many ways
Right.
for someone with a science background. My father was decidedly unscientific,
Okay.
much more overtly creative and artistic.
Okay.
He was very passionate about language and sociopolitical issues. So the reason he went into linguistics was because he was way too early on the China, Russia will dominate the world tip.
Right.
So in the 80s, he was like, I'm going to learn Mandarin, I'm going to learn Russian, and I'm going to become a linguist. So I understand
Wow.
the components of these languages and how to kind of bridge the gap between East and West.
It goes to show that if you were paying attention, even back then,
Mm-hmm.
you could tell,
Yes.
you know,
Certainly.
because it's like sometimes in our current age, people that we know, we have conversations with people, it's like they tend to forget, like, this is not a new issue,
Certainly.
you know?
Certainly.
What kind of music was playing in the house when you were growing up?
My mother didn't listen to very much music and still doesn't.
Okay.
She likes some classical music,
Right.
and it's not the classical music I like, which is funny.
Okay.
My dad was a hippie.
Okay.
He grew up right in the era,
Right.
and spent a lot of time in San Francisco,
Oh,
Texas,
so classic
in his
rock.
youth. Yes, so
Okay.
lots of classic rock. Steely Dan
Mm-hmm.
was a big one,
Classic.
of course. Dire Straits,
Yes. Okay.
all of that stuff.
This is very telling for me. This is definitely painting a picture of what was happening in your house.
A lot of cultural clash. Yes.
Right. But that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you listen to that music or what was your reaction to that music?
I liked it a lot, actually. I worshipped my father as a little girl.
Right.
And he was such a, it was me, my mom, and my grandmother, and my dad.
Right.
So there was always sort of this, like, all of the women, we're Chinese, we're doing our thing,
Right.
and then my dad's there.
Right.
And so it was always kind of this interesting thing because my dad represented this kind of like piece of Western culture that also was very iconoclastic compared to everything else. Like, he wasn't like my school teachers. He wasn't like
Right.
what you see on TV. He was like a pot smoking, like, very
Right.
left leaning. He had me reading Noam Chomsky when I was 11,
Right.
like very radicalized kind of anti-societal
Right.
in many ways.
Anti-establishment. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
yes.
great.
So, I always thought he was so cool as a kid, and I wanted to understand what he was into and what he liked. Um, and he influenced my musical taste a lot. He showed me Carole King when I was young,
Right.
and just to see like a woman playing piano, writing songs, and then learning about her role kind of in like Black music culture, this
Right.
like white Jewish woman writing all of these songs
Right.
for Motown and stuff. And then
That's the bass player, right?
Carole King?
Carole King, yeah.
No, she was the songwriter and pianist.
Who's the bass player that you're... Oh, anyways, I know who you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and he was the one that got me into jazz, and he was always kind of trying to open my mind to new stuff.
Right. It's interesting when you have a parent, when I talk with people and they have a parent who's attuned to art,
Mhm.
and that they kind of feel, these parents seem to know that it's important to impart some kind of art culture on their kids.
Mhm. Mhm.
It sort of marks, it's a demarcation for me in my conversations when it's like, both my parents didn't care, they didn't know, and I had to get to it myself,
Mhm.
versus like a child who had a parent who was like, listen to this kid,
Right. Yeah.
It makes a big difference, and we never talk about it, but like, it's a big piece of the puzzle in a very subtle way.
Absolutely. I think even just the idea of valuing art, right?
100%.
It becomes a fundamental model for what do you believe is important about society as a child.
Absolutely. Very well said.
Um,
I agree.
For me, it was really interesting too, because my mother wanted me to study piano or violin as a child, as Chinese mothers do.
Right.
And my dad was all for it. He wanted me to be well versed musically, and I showed a great acclivity toward music from a young age.
At what age did you start playing music?
I was started in piano lessons at the age of 4.
The sort of typical...
Conservatory, concert pianist. I was very much in that world growing up. But as a result, that was a huge amount of the music that consumed me. Just in terms of time spent listening, trying to understand.
Right.
So it was really fun to have a parent that was very well versed in popular music and admired musicians a lot, because he would bring these quandaries to me, like, okay, you like this song on the radio, can you play it?
Right.
And I would be like, well, how will I do that? You know? And so even just these ideas of like, okay, well, as a musician, it's important to be able to hear a song and then learn it by ear, because isn't that fun? And isn't that great to be able to absorb the sounds around you and emulate them?
So you can do this.
It's sometimes better than others, yes.
Wow.
Not
Amazing.
Instantly.
I understand, but like, I mean, you got that sort of
yeah.
muscle memory, if you will.
I mean, I've been a musician my whole life as well, you know. So classically trained pianist and then jazz school. So
you went to school to study jazz?
I did, yes, at Concordia.
Before we get there, I want to ask you, how were you as a child?
Very good.
Right. Okay, sure.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of room. Once I was in my teens, I certainly found some pathways to secretly rebel. But I'm an only child. I lived in an incredibly demanding and strict household. Both of my parents had incredibly high standards.
There was pressure on you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was to achieve.
I understand. Yes. As one does, as one Chinese baby does.
Yeah, well, all immigrant children, I think.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate in that sense. My dad was like very trusting.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, he still gave me performance anxiety.
Right.
Like any immigrant parent does, but
Yes.
for sure it was like, I appreciated that about him.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that my parents trusted me. I always did well academically. I was, very focused as a child, much more focused than now. I can't believe it when I think back.
You had you didn't have the problems you have today.
It's true.
Let's think about that in that way.
But yeah, I think there was a great deal of trust in terms of me getting what I needed to get done.
Hmm.
But the things I had to get done were far and beyond, I think, generally what other children my age were asked to do.
Right.
Just even in terms of like, my typical week as a kid growing up was wake up, practice half an hour to an hour of piano in the morning before school, go to school, come home, do another 90 minutes at least of piano, homework, then go to the conservatory, either music theory, music history, ear training, or private piano lesson. And
What's
then
this idea of having a child be so proficient at piano? Is the idea for every Chinese child to be a concert pianist?
no, absolutely not. In fact, it's frowned upon.
So explain to me the logic behind it. Like, is it to learn discipline?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, because that makes
Discipline,
sense.
cultural competence. I think that's a big piece of it too. The
What do you
idea
mean?
that this is like the music of the elite, and to have a deeper understanding of what this music is and its importance
So in a way, it's kind of a
culturally.
flex.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, interesting.
Uh, yeah, and I think the achievement piece is great. I would say that most. I don't want to generalize. I don't. I'll say actually, discounting culture.
Hmm.
Most parents do not want their children to become musicians.
I would have to agree.
So,
But I have big problems with that.
right. I'm just saying, when I think about it from a Chinese perspective of why would you want your child to have those skills if not to become a musician,
Hmm.
it's more about just having a skill that is something other than studying.
I understand. I mean, I still think that like it's quite a demand on a child.
It is.
It's like you could do half of that and still be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by today's standards, like if imagine if I at 35 were to practice piano for 4 hours a day,
Yes.
I would be a beast.
Yes.
And at the same time, I'm aware that it would be all encompassing my life.
Right.
It's a lot to ask.
Certainly.
Did you feel that way?
Well, I loved it.
Okay,
And I think that's, I had zero resistance
gotcha.
toward piano. It was really something I enjoyed.
Hmm.
I know that that's a rarity, and that wasn't the experience a lot of the other people that I was interacting with at the conservatory.
Right, I bet.
But I really loved it. I enjoyed practicing, and of course, there were times where I would wake up and be like, "Damn, I really wish I didn't have to do 4 hours of this today."
Yeah, sure. But
But
that's still a thing
well,
today.
what else am I going to do? I mean,
Yeah.
to your point, I can't be disciplined like that now because
Yeah.
I have bills to pay.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I mean, yeah, it would have been fun to play more with toys, I guess. But also, how wonderful to get to spend my time learning how to express myself at an instrument.
I agree. I think that if I could redo it all again, I would absolutely wish my parents made me stick to it.
Right.
Absolutely.
But it's so challenging. I mean, I taught music privately and in group settings for a long time. And I was very reticent to demand practice from my students, especially my young students.
Okay.
The ones that wanted to do it and felt very motivated to come back every week and show me something, some sort of progression,
Hmm.
I would really encourage that. But to me, it was like, if they're not enjoying it, there's not much you can do.
I agree.
Aside from really, like, if you want to put in the hours as a parent to sit next to your child
Mm.
and put in that time with them
Yeah,
and
that
encourage them and allow them to see like the progress they're making and what's worthwhile about that, which my father did when I was very young,
Right.
and that was helpful.
hmm
It's hard to just, like if you just tell them to practice and then you're off doing your own thing, you don't know what the child is practicing. You don't know.
You're not really connecting.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you're not able to impart upon them the joys of that kind of discipline of
You're
like,
right.
well, look, yesterday you couldn't do this, but today, after we did this yesterday, today now it's easier, and now let's add the left hand, and
Let me ask you a question about that.
Mhm.
I feel that one of the things that is a misrepresentation of artists in the public space is that like there's a lot of virtue to
Mm.
being good at something.
Mhm.
We never talk about that aspect of what it means to be an artist.
Mm.
You know, it's like, well, I learned discipline through being an artist.
Mhm.
That's a big deal.
Mhm.
And for some reason, whenever we talk about artists, it's like we look at them very differently than sort of disciplined people. I feel that we should bring that more to the forefront of what it means to be an artist.
Right.
I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
growing up,
Mhm.
who were your favorite artists as a teenager?
Lauryn Hill
Okay,
was very big for me, especially as a teen.
right.
Preteen into teens. Um, Elton John.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, who else did I love as a teen? The first time I heard the Unicorns, I think I was about 14. Do you know this group?
Nope.
I talk about them a lot in interviews.
What?
They're from Montreal.
Okay.
They did
The
one
Unicorns
record.
are from Montreal?
Yes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Please.
I mean, this is like this is old hipster
Okay.
lore.
Okay.
They did one record called "Who Will Cut Our Hair When We're Gone," and they were a trio. Who was it? Jamie Thompson and oh gosh, I forget the other main guy's name. Anyway, they did this one record. They fell apart as a band. It to me, as a 14-year-old, hearing a lot of different kinds of music. You know, like very much in the classical circuit, competitive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
doing all of that, spending a lot of time in that world, absorbing hip hop, absorbing, you know, all of the pop radio. I also loved Alicia Keys as a piano playing singer.
Sure.
Suddenly, you know, the blog era
Right.
opens up.
Right.
You know, I'm on MySpace, I'm looking at MP3 blogs, and I'm fascinated by Montreal,
Mhm.
generally speaking, as a Western Canadian.
Right.
And so I find out about this band, the Unicorns, and I listened to that record. I think probably my first encounter would have been on an MP3 blog. Like I listened to one of the singles, and it was so bizarre and free and strange to me. Like I had just never heard anything like that before. And that was really like it created an obsession with the Montreal scene at that
I was
time.
going to say, so that's one of the connecting dots with
Yes.
Montreal for you?
Yes, absolutely.
That band that you were listening to as a teenager on MySpace?
Yes. Yes, the Unicorns.
Okay, amazing.
I still have the CD. And it's all like made with like a pencil crayon. It's like a beautiful CD.
What's the one artist that made you feel that's what I want to do? Is there a marker in time? Is there a moment for you?
I don't know.
Right.
I do remember maybe being about 7 years old and writing a letter to Britney Spears,
Wow.
telling her like I want to be a singer too, and you know, like I hope that one day we'll meet like in this world.
Is this where we find out that she wrote back?
No, I wish. My fellow Sagittarian.
I hear you. Elton John, man. Elton John is so emotional.
Yes.
Like I feel, I mean, I know it's like sort of past perhaps, but like I feel like it's almost people don't want to say how good Elton John is.
Yeah, I guess because it's cheesy now, right?
It's not cheesy for me.
I know. It's not for me either. I feel very passionate about Elton
I
John.
I love the story of Elton John. I love that he wrote. People don't know this necessarily, but like as I'm sure you know, he wrote the music and his partner wrote the lyrics.
Yes.
They never fought. They never argued. They never made the music in the same room.
Yes.
And those guys are so good.
Mm-hmm.
Elton John made one record a year for most of his career.
Yes. He's very prolific. It's partly, I mean, I have for those of you listening, check out whoAH-lee.substack.com. I have a Substack that I wrote about my love of Elton John and that relationship between Elton John and Bernie Taupin.
And that's why you covered that song.
Yes.
Benny and the Jets.
Yes.
Now, you know what? I was wondering. Okay, this makes sense because I love Benny and the Jets, but at the same time, it's kind of a deep cut.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, odd choice. I loved it 100%. So is this why you did that song? Just for your love of it?
Well, I was licensing my music to Terrorbird Publishing for a while for Sync Stuff, and they did a roundup one year asking all of the queer artists that they represented for publishing to do a cover of another queer artist
Right.
for like as a Pride
Wow.
compilation.
You nailed it.
So I was like, well, clearly I have to cover Elton.
Right.
And Benny and the Jets is just traditionally like one of my favorite songs that he's ever written.
100%. Do you remember if there was an age that you knew I want to be an artist? Or was that ever a decision? Was that ever a moment? Because at some point you do have to take that sort of decision for yourself.
Yeah, I don't know that it felt conscious. You know, I remember there was a time like around the time I was like 10 to 12 maybe.
Mhm.
I was obsessed with the idea of becoming a lawyer,
Okay.
which is so strange for a child. But I was always reading far beyond my kind of allotted expected reading level for
Right.
whatever age I was at. Um, and I think my mom had gotten like a box of free books or something from the library, and there was a bunch of John Grisham novels in it. Are you familiar with John Grisham?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so it's all of these like lawyer thrillers.
Yeah.
And so I was like 10 reading these like law thrillers, being like, wow, like being a lawyer is
It's so thrilling.
exciting. Yeah.
Woo.
I was very like serious about that for a while, and I remember like talking to my dad about it and being like, well, what kind of lawyer should I be? And
Wow.
he was like, as a 10-year-old, he was like, you should consider international law if you want to like really like do things that have impact on our world. And so we were having conversations like that. Meanwhile, I'm a concert pianist child.
You know what? Like,
And-
this is a very Asian career that you're going for, if I may.
Yes.
You know, concert pianist / lawyer / doctor, maybe?
My mom is still disappointed that I'm not a lawyer. So
I understand.
anyway,
Well, you did work in, you work in the music industry. I think there's business to it.
I do draft
know.
contracts from
There you
time
go.
to
So I
time.
think you should tell her that. I
Yeah.
feel it's connected.
Yeah, I do. I'm a specialist in contract law.
When did DJing come into your life?
Oh, this is such a long story. So I never meant to or asked to be a DJ.
Okay.
When I finished jazz school, I was just a regular gigging jazz musician, doing a lot of top 40 gigs and playing in restaurants and
Right.
as
Yeah.
we do.
As one does. Yeah.
And it was sort of disappointing because when you're in music school and you're really in it, a lot of people complain about music school because they feel like it doesn't give them an accurate representation of what the landscape is like.
Sure,
which
but
I
that's
think
true
is
of all school.
Yeah. I don't necessarily feel that way. It was disappointing for me when it wasn't the 1970s and there wasn't a band in every venue.
Yeah. And you're
But-
playing while people are eating kind of thing now?
Right.
Yeah.
But as they did in the 70s,
Yeah, it's still romantic, I suppose.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think it's a different thing. Like when you're in music school, you should just be focused on playing and like being in the fantasy, I think.
I agree, but I think that there's a disproportionate amount of work that went into something where the reward is so small.
That's debatable. The reward is what the reward is.
I suppose.
Anyway, all of that to say, I was, not enjoying gigging as much as I thought I would.
Right. Makes sense.
I was like, I do not want to sing Green Light
Right.
anymore.
Right.
And
Excuse me, I just want to clarify. You were singing and playing.
usually singing
Right.
in those
Okay.
in that kind of particular setting.
Wow.
Like doing top 40 gigs and
At what age were you doing this?
this would have been right out of jazz school, so I would have been like 20 to 22
Right.
about. And basically I needed to take it. I felt like it was kind of creatively draining me to be just an entertainer.
Right.
And so I went to my local queer bar, Royal Phoenix, R.I.P.
Whoa.
And, I frequented the bar a lot. And at that time, I had already started the Hua Li project kind of just as an experimentation. Like, it wasn't very serious yet. But I had some songs, and sometimes I would perform there, opening for other people.
Gotcha.
So I went to them, and I was like, hey, I really don't want to do top 40 gigs anymore, but I need money. So do you have a job? Any job? Bar back,
Right.
bartender, anything. And they said that I could serve brunch. And they asked me, do you speak French? And I said, yes. And they asked me, do you have serving experience? And I said, yes. And both of those things were a lie. So
Right. Now we're going going somewhere. Okay.
So I came in for my first shift. I was very bad at both speaking French and serving.
That's a tough first day.
Yes.
Whoa.
If I had just been honest, they probably would have trained me.
Yeah.
But I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to get the job.
Don't you feel that, like, when you're younger, you just want the job, you need jobs, so you're so
Yeah.
stressed about getting
There's
a job.
no foresight.
Yeah.
Because they
Absolutely.
probably would have hired me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was a mess. Then eventually they were like, hey, how about you don't handle plates anymore because you're not good at this?
Right.
So you can be the brunch hostess.
Right.
And that was better because I could have my key phrases in French that I could just say when people entered, and then I
Wow.
wouldn't have to have a conversation.
Is that where you learned to speak French?
Kind of, yeah.
Wow, amazing. Hua, give me 1 second.
Absolutely. Slight level adjustment.
A slight level adjustment.
Check, check, check.
Oh yeah, still going.
Great. Anyway, all of this to say, eventually one of the owners of the club restaurant.
Yeah, it was a club or a restaurant?
It was both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Day and night
Restaurant
kind of
by
thing.
day, yeah. Club
Gotcha.
at night. Came in, and I didn't know he was one of the owners. And I was behind the bar, and he asked me a question that was not on my list of things that I knew how to say as a hostess.
Wow.
And it caught me off guard because he was asking about like the beer selections, and that's not something people ask for at brunch.
Right.
So I completely fumbled it. And then he complained to the manager who had given me the job. He was like, who's this Anglophone you have here? So she felt very bad for me. And what she offered me instead, she was like, I know you need to survive.
Right.
So I have to fire you as the brunch hostess because your cover is blown now.
Oh.
But there's no one running Tuesday nights at the club. So if you want to promote Tuesday nights, I can give you like a lump sum of money, and you can keep all of that money yourself if you don't hire another DJ.
Whoa.
So I was like, okay. And so she was like, naturally assumed that because I was a rapper, I
You knew
could
how to DJ. Gotcha.
So once again, I lied to this person that had so much faith in me again and again. And I
was
was
gonna
like,
say, you're really breaking that trust.
yeah. I was like, you know what? Thank you.
I got you.
I will do Tuesdays and I will DJ.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be great. So I went to Moog. I bought like a $50 MIDI control, like the cheapest thing they had,
Yes.
like it wasn't even laid out like a DJ controller. It was like 4 knobs that you could assign to anything with a crossfader.
Right. Oof.
And
yeah.
that's it.
Gotcha.
That's all I had.
Right.
And then I cracked Tractor, and I mapped the MIDI controller, and bam, there I go. I'm a DJ. And the first several sets were awful.
Right.
But, I'm a musician, so I figured it out eventually.
Sure. Is this a theme in your life of like, you seem to be very resourceful and a go-getter, so to speak?
I think so. After that, I stopped lying about my abilities.
It was less stressful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet.
I mean, once, and DJing ended up being a great filler for exactly what I thought I would be doing after, music school, which was like just playing gigs to make money.
Yeah, being in the arts, being involved in some capacity, better than waiting tables because it's not your expertise at this point.
Certainly,
Yeah,
yes.
sure. How did you transition from that to like working in the industry? Because I know you were a label manager. Are you still involved?
I'm still a label manager.
Right.
Yes, at Next Door Records.
Can you tell me a bit about that position, about that
Yeah.
job, what you do?
Absolutely. I came into it. I've had a lot of other industry jobs that I'll spare you the details on. But because of that experience, I came into the job at Nextdoor in kind of an interesting way, in the sense that I was one of the first artists signed to Nextdoor when it was launched in 2018. So I was kind of part of the original roster. I worked very closely with them on my first record and subsequent
Gotcha.
releases, and just got along with the team really well. When the label manager in 2021 decided to move to the UK, the spot opened up, and I had a panic about I don't know why I convinced myself that without this particular person advocating for me that they would probably drop me,
Right.
which was, in retrospect, completely unfounded. Like there was no way that would have happened.
That's just anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
But my anxiety drove me to save myself on the roster by applying for the label manager job in order to continue having an advocate
Right.
for the project on the label, which would then
Who
be
better?
me.
Yeah, exactly. Who's better than you for you?
Right. Much to my surprise, I got the job.
Right. Well, they need good people.
And I mean, it was incredible. I was a front runner from the moment that I expressed interest in the position.
Amazing.
And it's been great. I love it. I love working for the people that work for me as an artist. It's an interesting kind of triangulation that we have. But it's one of the only places where I could potentially make a steady income and have benefits.
Yeah.
That would also completely allow me the leeway to do what I need to do as an artist. You know, next month I'm going on tour for a month with Land of Talk, and what other job would be like, okay, see you when you're back?
That's amazing.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. So that's 2018 when you released your first record.
Yes.
It's
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
How do you go from DJing? Because you said that even back then you were sort of starting. You've always had the same artist name?
I released one record as Peggy Hogan.
Okay.
Right out of jazz school.
Gotcha.
And that was always intended to kind of be my main project. So I started Hua Li really as an experimentation. The stuff I was doing as Peggy Hogan was a 4-piece kind of neo-soul band.
Okay.
And I love that music, but I also was deep in the nightlife scene. I was really involved in the Torn Curtain in its early days, and I loved going to Silver Door. I loved going to the Fall and, all of those illegal after hours of that era.
Right.
And, loved dancing. I loved electronic music. I loved being at Royal Phoenix and in that club scene as well. So I wanted to make some sort of music that was coherent in that space.
Right.
Whether it be, and it was very nebulous at the time. Like I was billed as Hua Li if I was joining a group of noise musicians just making distortion, or just whatever wasn't the Neo Soul project.
Right.
That's what it was. Like I was billed as that as a DJ and everything else.
Did you? And that's a question that I was curious about. Is we'll get to it later, but like you produced the songs on this new record, correct?
No. I mean, yes and no.
Did you start beat making at some point?
I've never considered myself to be a great beat maker or a great producer.
Gotcha.
But I sure can make a very beautiful sounding demo.
Right.
And I'm slowly gaining some confidence there. I just, I'll be releasing a remix I made of a Land of Talk track next month while we're on tour.
Okay.
And that was the first time where I was like, okay, wow, I've actually produced something that feels real, that isn't just a demo.
Right.
Like I took it from that space of like, I'm just making this to communicate an idea, versus I'm making this to be a real a piece
An
of
official,
music to be consumed.
right. Did you start, when's the first time you started playing around on a computer?
Very early.
Yeah.
My high school, well, my middle school, I guess, whatever that is in the 8th grade, which I don't even know what 8th grade is in Quebec. Sec something.
Secondaire, it's confusing. It's
Right.
secondaire 1,
Yeah.
secondary 1, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I started a school in that year that had a lot of money, and they had a computer in the music room that had Pro Tools on it.
Whew. That's one lucky,
You know?
yeah.
So I
Wow.
arranged with the band teacher to have time after school to just like fuck around
See,
in Pro
there,
Tools.
that's you again, planning and doing things and going above and beyond. Do you notice what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
people aren't like that necessarily.
Well,
And so you had it in your mind.
uh-huh.
There's a computer there.
Uh-huh.
I want to do this thing.
Uh-huh.
And if I just go talk to this lady and arrange this thing, I can have what I want.
Yeah, I think it was actually my dad's idea.
Okay.
To
Because
be
I was
like-
going to say your dad being involved so much into computer languages.
Mhm.
Computers must have never felt alien to you.
No,
Right.
I was we were super early on everything.
So you saw Pro Tools, you saw those things, and I'm not talking about mastering here. I'm just talking about being aware of what they are.
Certainly.
You've always sort of
Mhm.
known in that sense now.
Yeah, I'm a rare person that like my first interaction with a DAW was at 14 years old, and it wasn't even cracked.
Right.
It
Right.
was like
Yeah.
someone bought Pro Tools. I was using actual Pro Tools.
That's crazy.
And I had zero proficiency in it, and I'm an Ableton user now. Like if you put me in front of Pro Tools, I have no idea what's going on. But you know, it did give me enough. Just clicking around, reading through the user manual.
Yeah, just
And-
being confronted, being aware of what it
Right.
is, being like, silly things like what's a channel, what's an
Sure.
EQ. Yeah.
Exactly.
When you come at those things at 30 versus coming to them at like 14 is
Right.
a world's difference.
So yeah, I mean, I was very interested in the idea of being able to record my music,
Mhm.
and I was writing songs always. That was something even when I was like a 4-year-old.
Okay, wait.
In
You were always writing songs even so young.
Yeah, it just felt like, okay, like I'm playing other people's music, so surely like I'm supposed to play my own music too.
Did you write that stuff down?
Yeah,
Do you still have those books?
I don't know, probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very, very rare that at like so young you would be. And what like you wrote like words and stuff?
Yeah. I also wrote composition. Like I was very interested in like trying to write a symphony as like an 8-year-old, you know, and I was like, how do I like, what is this? Like, you know, I would bring out, because you always have like blank sheet music as
Yes.
a music student, you know?
Yeah.
So I would like write out like the whole thing with like violin 1, violin 2, like viola, cello.
That's
and I'd like
amazing.
try to like imagine what it was. And, you know, obviously very simple,
Mhm.
but yeah, there was a part of me always as a very young person that understood that not only do I want to be realizing compositions of other people, but that there was, you know, to me, the ultimate thing was to have the composition. Like,
Mhm.
isn't that the most important thing? Chopin's been dead forever, but I'm still
Yeah.
grappling hours a day to try and realize
Sure.
this piece, you know?
I'm talking to you right now and I feel like everything you're doing right now is meant to be.
I think so too. Yes, it feels very coherent for me. And it has taken having lived 1,000 lives to live the life I have today.
It feels like it. That's great. Here's the thing I want to talk about. I'm going to read it because it's a long sentence, and I prepared a statement.
Okay.
I find that we don't view artists and musicians adequately in society. Often seen as carefree individuals who just flow through life, people who aren't responsible and who just want to party. I find that it invalidates one of my strongest beliefs. All I see are hardworking, passionate people who dare to dream a life for themselves. Often forced into the margins of society, forced into a role we never wanted. But speaking for myself, I would trust an artist over a politician any day. Do what I just said, does it resonate with you?
Absolutely. Um, I wouldn't trust every artist over every politician.
Having said that, yeah, sure.
What I'll say is, and this is to your point earlier about discipline.
Hmm.
I think when people tell me that I'm talented, oftentimes I'll tell them that I'm actually not,
Hmm.
in the sense that I know a lot of people who had a natural proclivity toward understanding music or hearing music um, in a much more intuitive way.
Right.
People who are born with perfect pitch or I guess we're all born with perfect pitch. People who are able to maintain their perfect pitch
Okay,
over a
interesting.
lifetime, for instance. Um, it was always a very, um, it was always a very conscious struggle for me. Every skill that I've learned musically. And it's not to say I don't have some inherent talent. And I think I'm inherently creative and I do have good ideas. But as a musician, everything has been challenging. I've really had to work for every skill I have.
Hmm.
Um, and I have to work to maintain it as well.
Yeah.
So it becomes kind of nebulous to me what talent is
Hmm.
or what artistic genius or merit
Right.
is in that sense, because, you know, at a certain point, everyone has to hone their craft.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that I'm also a carefree person that loves to party. And I feel that I've earned some leeway in
Hmm.
order to be that kind of person
Sure.
because of all of the discipline. I don't have to maintain now as hard as I used to
Hmm.
because, there's the 10, 20, 30,000 hours
Sure. Well, that's
in
very
there.
different, though.
Hmm.
That's like, as you're saying, you're earning it, you
Yes.
know?
Um,
But there is definitely a tendency to see artists, we don't necessarily value everything that they've acquired.
I think that's very true.
Come on, like,
But
we're hard
but that's
workers.
not the sexy part. And I also think that that's coherent because from a marketing point of view, I wish that we were able to value the artistic output for the amount of work it is.
Hmm.
Yes. At the same time, I think it's very important that artists still have that scope to be outside of societal expectations. Otherwise, what are we speaking back toward? We need to have that kind of like, I'm participating, but I don't want to participate. And I want freedom in a way that is more free than what other people get. And I want to have experiences that are extreme and challenging.
Sure.
And, so that's the meat of what's interesting about art for the average person, right?
Hmm.
Is that it reflects a heightened experience of being.
Very well said.
In order to reflect that well, with grace and with in a way that's tangible, yes, comes all of the discipline and all of the work and the foreknowledge and the depth of thinking.
Yeah, the insight,
Yes.
the questioning.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. So I think both have to be there for most artists.
Hmm.
To me, the public perception of artists as just the freewheeling, iconoclastic, unreliable foil
Yeah.
to kind of um, legitimate society, I could see why that's what comes to the fore because that's what's delicious
Yeah,
about.
it's a bullet point, it's a talking point.
Hmm.
Yeah. I feel that it's to our detriment.
I think it's to our detriment if we buy into that as artists.
That's one thing. I agree with you. I feel that I guess I'm saying that, like, some artists have moved me and changed my life in such profound ways.
Hmm.
And sometimes I'll read something online that says, "Oh, I really like this person until he started having an opinion. Stick to
Mm,
making music."
mm,
That's very hurtful to me
right.
because we are musicians, sure, but we're also citizens.
Right. I
You
mean,
know?
And you, if we're to compare musicians and politicians, like, what is the difference? Why is Trump's opinion more valid than mine?
I don't think it is, but people certainly seem to think it is.
Right.
You know,
Um,
that's a way to keep someone down, I feel.
Absolutely. I do think it's up to every artist, and I don't want to hear every musician's opinion, because not every musician has a well researched.
That goes without
considered,
saying.
You know,
That goes without saying.
for those artists, uh, that opinion has been a piece of who they are as an artist from the beginning, and having a wealth of knowledge and a deep understanding of culture, and a library of reference points that inform their vision. Certainly, I want to hear that person's opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, do you agree that like all art is political?
Yes.
So in that regard, I feel that like there should be a bit more of an openness to what artists have to say.
Certainly.
And of course, like I agree with you, not everybody, but that's discernment.
Right.
Like you know that this is just pop music. This is just, I don't mean pop music in the negative way, but just like this is fodder.
Commercial,
Yeah. Before we go any further, I absolutely have to go to the bathroom.
Me too. This is a great break. Are we rolling everywhere?
And through the magic of editing, we are back.
Love it.
You're a label manager. You've been doing this for quite a while, being an artist, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I also, we're speaking of like how artists are people who have voices and how we discredit often the work. I also have another problem with the industry, and I feel that it is that they infantilize artists. A lot of people that I've met in my life, they want to become artists because they seem to understand that like when you become an artist, everybody does everything for you. Okay? So you don't carry the stuff, you don't do the documents, you aren't involved in legal, you aren't involved in the financial. And that's how the label business model was created. It's an industry that like, don't worry about it, buddy. We'll do all of it. We'll take care of the money and you just do you. And, as a teenager, impressionable teens, you're a bit curious about music. I certainly noticed that.
Interesting.
I never wanted that. Both my parents are entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much like, you do it all, you do it yourself. It was valued in my household.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly as I got older, I realized that it's this thing of like, oh, I don't want to do this. Well, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, you don't want to take care of your finances?
Right.
That's very odd. I'm not saying you need to be a banker. You're a musician.
I mean, listen, I don't like taking care of my finances, but I'll do it.
Have you observed this sort of infantilization of the artist in the industry?
Yes, and I'll also admit, in the spirit of culpability, that I participate in the infantilization of artists from time to time.
That's fine.
It's really interesting. I think some people, you get that rare artist that is just such a diamond in the rough, and there's something incredibly special about them, and they are incapable of functioning as a human adult. So those people, sure, they need more support. And
I agree.
And that is a huge minority.
I was going to say that's few and far in between.
A lot of times, this is a very complex question you're asking.
I'm sorry, we don't have to. You don't have to go all deep.
Okay,
it really doesn't matter.
I want to break this down. So, to your point here, I think of two kinds of types of artists,
right,
that I deal with as a label manager.
Right.
These are not the only two types, but in this example, there's one type of artist that is a very young, hungry artist, that is self-driven, but has certain expectations about the industry that makes them eventually jaded and feel like without the ins of some magical person pulling the levers,
Mm-hmm.
it will never work.
Right.
So some people get trapped in that narrative.
Right.
There's another type of artist that, for whatever reason, a team falls into place very easily for them early.
Yes.
And it can go either way. Sometimes those people learn to like really understand managing a team and are very involved. What generally happens more is that there are one or two bad apples on the team that gatekeep the artist from their own business
Mm-hmm.
and keep them out of the dark, so that they grow and they grow very effectively. But there comes a time where, maybe the team falls apart or whatnot, and,
Right.
and they don't have the skills.
Right.
And then it creates a cycle of dependency.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you don't even know what those people are doing for you, but apparently they're doing a lot of stuff for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
often tell artists to really start thinking of, this is gross to say, but to think of themselves as the CEO of their whole career. And so when you have a team, it's you never want to add a member to your team because you want to do less work.
mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work managing somebody. So even the idea of manager and artist, I think, is such a strange hierarchy, because it's like, as an artist, you should be telling your manager what to do,
Yeah.
not the other way.
Absolutely.
But you need to have that kind of forthright attitude in terms of like, this is what this relationship is.
Mm-hmm.
I need you because you have XYZ connections and I don't have the time to go and network and go and get the money. So you go and get the money and I'll focus on making the product that we get money from.
Yeah.
Fine. Or, hey, booking agent, I need you to go and get me to da-da-da-da. I think a lot of artists feel disempowered because they're like, oh, I'm so happy to get this team member. It's going to be less work for me. I don't have to book my own shows anymore. And then they're like, oh, I hate my agent. They're not booking me any shows.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, did you meet with your agent to inform them of your next 18 months?
Mm-hmm.
Is your agent aware of all of the releases coming up? Is there anything special that you would book a tour around? All of these things, all of these questions. What kinds of shows do you want to be on? Are you trying to play festivals or clubs? If you're
Right.
playing clubs, are you headlining or are you opening? People misunderstand what their team is for. Their team is
agree.
to serve them.
I
And
agree.
in order to serve them, they have to, it ends up being way more work because you're communicating to them a larger vision.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're just booking your own shows, you know what your vision is.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think, yes, there's that. There's a misunderstanding for a lot of artists what it means to have a team and what their role should be. And that also contributes to the infantilization.
I think you said it all. What do you make of the situation in Montreal in Quebec, should I say, with the French and English language debate? The way it's fractured.
Oh, mon Dieu, no comment.
No comment? Okay.
Legault, please don't kick me out.
No, please get out of here. Anyways, he's not even listening right now.
Imagine if he was listening.
I would be
just
so stoked.
fuming,
I would be so stoked.
fuming. Why aren't they speaking French?
I would love to have him here. Honestly, like, yo, qu'est-ce qui se passe, man, François? Viens voir ton boy. I find it very difficult for me as an English, my music is in English.
Mm-hmm.
I was not a label manager for as long as you have been.
Mm.
I've been working in the industry myself, and for a long, long time, I know how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Yes.
And I find it's so depressing. Like I guess the ultimate, and the truth is, for me, it actually demotivated me a lot.
The French language thing in particular.
Yeah, the barrier, because I feel like I know so many francophone French-speaking musicians. Like, if it were to be like a gang, I guess I know the whole gang.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
the Aus gang, one would say.
Yes, 100%. And it's a bubble,
Right.
and it doesn't exist outside of Quebec.
Right.
And my feeling for that has often been like, I'm using myself as an example. I'm such a good ambassador for Quebec, for Canada. Like,
Mm.
you guys should be giving me the grants or whatever the hell it is, because like, there's always this sentence they use in grant applications, to shine, to make de rayonner abroad, So, and I'm
Yes.
like, well, yeah, look no further. I'm your guy.
Right.
And you work for a label. What's the financial situation for in terms of the grants? Do you guys get any
Oh yeah,
grants?
yeah, we
Yeah?
do. Uh, well, I mean, this is
I mean, it's a big topic, but I
no,
mean,
no,
like,
no. I mean, this is a really interesting thing about me is that I have nothing to do with Quebec.
right.
Except that I live in Montreal and I love living in Montreal and I'll probably never leave.
Big statement.
I work for a company that's based in Ontario,
Right.
So our funding at Nextdoor is completely outside of the Quebec system.
I did not know that. Okay.
And we have any funding. We have this equivalent funding of any of the like major indies in Canada, like an arts and crafts or a
Amazing.
Dare to Care or Paperback. We're in that group of factor envelope funded labels.
Well, there you go.
It's not a lot of money, but we make it work. Ideally, we sell enough records that we don't have to rely on that every year, and some years are better than others. When it comes to the Quebec system and being an Anglophone artist in Quebec, certainly, I benefit from things like SODEC and Calc.
Yep.
The majority of the funding I access does tend to be more on the national level. And my growth as an artist has been vis-a-vis Toronto in many ways.
Okay.
I have always been very explicit about the idea that I am a Montreal artist, and that's important to me. I think that is symbolically, creatively, spiritually very different from what a Toronto artist is.
Yeah.
And yet, as an Anglophone, it's a necessary evil to go through the system of Toronto because that access is just not here. Most of the people that I network with are in Toronto.
You're confirming all of what I'm thinking. Yeah. Okay.
Right. I love the music scene in Montreal. And I think there's a lot of really interesting Quebec-based companies that are having a reach further than our little bubble here. I think of, Fair Enough Publishing, for instance, who are really able to make a mark elsewhere because they're not dealing in the sort of incestuous, like, this is our little market that exists here in the French language, and maybe we send artists to Belgium and France sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's also fascinating. I mean, I feel jealousy sometimes for Francophone artists because of the glass ceiling, in a sense, where it's like, I don't know. I mean, I think of someone like Loud. Okay, this only exists in Quebec. This artist that can sell out the Bell Center, and you drive 2 hours away to Ottawa, and you ask any Anglophone person in Ottawa who's Loud.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I think
he sold out a stadium 2 hours away last night.
Yeah, but speaking for myself, I would never want that.
I mean, I don't want it, but it's fascinating, right? That you have a sustainable career in such a small market.
It is fascinating. I hear you. I think it's just, I suppose that it has everything to do with the fact that I don't necessarily identify with the white francophone Québécois culture.
Sure.
If I was him, if I looked like him, talked like him, if I was him, I suppose I would feel like a superstar in Quebec.
Sure.
But like for me, I often say that like, I don't even think I'm a Toronto artist. I think I'm a UK artist.
Right.
I feel, it's just a feeling, right?
Yes.
These are just words. These are just abstract concepts. I guess I would love to have success in the UK.
Right.
Whereas like for me to be a superstar in Montreal, I'd be like,
well, yeah.
It's,
I mean, it's interesting on the Anglophone side, too, because there are acts that are Montreal superstars.
Yeah.
that are Anglophone that
Yeah.
also enter that same strange bubble,
Yep.
right? Where it's like they sell really good tickets here, but you put them in Toronto and 5 people show up.
Yeah. Anyways, we could go on forever in that. I want to switch it back to you. Switch it back to this new album. At the point that you are now in your life, seeing that this is one hell of a grind, what motivates you, but deeply, to keep creating and putting yourself out there? Because I find that as I get older and deeper, so do my own motivations for doing things.
I believe in the album as a form. It's not just about songs for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to me to demarcate chapters of my creative growth in the form of an album. And to me, that is like, in the same way that as an 8-year-old, I was trying to write symphonies. The artistic form that is an LP is, to me, kind of the greatest marker of artistic achievement that a popular artist or an artist working in popular music forms can achieve.
Right.
And so to me, one of my motivators is that I have to make records. You know, yes, I will make other songs along the way and collaborate and do whatever else. But I feel like my life is demarcated by each record that I
Right.
make. And
Right.
it's always takes way longer than I expect and is challenging in ways that I never can imagine each time. And I learn about myself and whatever.
So, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
with that said, what does your new album mean to you spiritually?
This is, in many ways, the most special album I've ever made. On an emotional, spiritual level, it is the body of work I feel closest to, and I think also saw me through what I imagine will be some of the most important transitions of my life.
Wow.
So yeah, just as a moment in time, it's very important to me because I know that these intervening almost 5 years now that I've been working on this record are such a fundamental piece of who I will be in the future.
Wow.
It's a record that deals a lot with becoming aware. It's a record that deals a lot with becoming conscious, I think, of things like trauma and coping mechanisms that we develop. Dissociation plays a lot into the record in the sense of like kind of feeling something nebulous and then peeling it back and finally upon reflection understanding, oh, I was removed from that and now I'm closer to it. And it has to do with memory and misremembering and holes in memory and patching that together. It's very much, I suppose, like a coming of age record in that sense of coming of late age, let's say.
Fair enough.
In the sense of, I feel that with Ripe Fruit Falls, it's the record for me that lands me in a place that I feel like is wholly authentic. That from here, I feel like I can move anywhere and it's coherent.
That feels like a really great place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the stems.
Yes.
The name of the song is The Fall, correct?
In the Fall.
In the Fall. Excusez-moi. The way I just broke it down is that I went with different layers and then I stacked them. So I'm going to start with the drums.
Okay.
I'm just going to start it not too loud. So tell me, who did you write this song with? Who did you produce this song? Did you work with somebody for this specific song?
So the whole album is produced by Alexander Thibault.
Okay.
Alexandre
Yes.
Thibault, as they say. And he's known beatmakerly as Glows.
Yes.
And we've been collaborating forever.
Okay. I wasn't aware that he did the whole record.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So our process basically, and I guess we'll hear the demo eventually, but
Absolutely.
I will often write the songs at the piano or the Wurlitzer or some keyboard instrument where
Right.
I'm very comfy.
Is that how you do most of your songwriting?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I'll sort of sketch out something that feels like a direction, and then I'll start putting stuff in Ableton. So I start producing a demo as soon as I can.
Gotcha.
I need to have a rhythmic feel to kind of have a picture of where things are going. Alex is an incredible producer, very talented jazz drummer, has the mind of a drummer. It just,
Right.
in terms of rhythm, thinks about things with a level of depth and precision that I just don't hear. I don't hear rhythm in music in that light as a vocalist pianist. It's just not my bag.
Gotcha.
You know?
Right. Makes sense.
So that's often, and I think it's great that you started with the drums here. That's often where the meat of his contribution starts.
Right.
Is I'll bring him this demo and then he'll cancel the drums and start building out
Right.
what he hears the pull rhythmically is suggesting.
Gotcha. Does the so you're sitting down, you're writing this song. Do you bring a song that is, so to speak, the chords, the arrangement is final-ish, final, not final? Is it just a verse, or do you just bring?
Usually I will bring a finalized arrangement.
Right.
To be discussed. You know,
I understand.
And some things, with this track, we like ditch the outro, in the end. And
Gotcha.
on some songs, I'll repeat a chorus 3 times because it feels nice to do it on the piano. And
Right.
then we're like, okay, we don't need to do that.
I noticed something really cool when I was playing around in the stems, which is like one of my favorite parts, because I get to have such a privileged inside look at a
Yes.
song, So I get to choose sort of what I want to tell the audience, so to speak, right? What I feel are like special elements. The next track is going to be the drums, but with the synths. And I feel that before we even play anything else of the song, it's a completely different song. Like, I was thinking, honestly, you need to release this version with like, remove the pianos. And I think that like people are gonna like, ugh, are you kidding me? Woo! Like, what is going on here? With the piano, it becomes so emotional immediately.
Yes.
Whereas this same song has a different song hidden in it. This, like, I don't know if I'm expressing myself correctly.
I hear you.
And it's very cool. Like, I don't think that if I muted half of my song, it would still sound as good.
Right. I think this is a huge credit to the way Alex works too, in the sense that I drop these like always incredibly emotional, very dense demos into his lap, and he is able to pull things back. I mean, when he produces, he usually mutes a lot of what I give him too.
Really?
Yeah, and then it's kind of like, okay, how do we superimpose
mesh?
these ideas?
Right.
I love working with Alex for that reason, because that is ultimately what I'm trying to capture all the time. My natural impulse is to write a piano ballad every single time, but
Great.
I want this,
Well, that's what makes a good collaboration.
Yes.
In the end, it's, oof.
I want it to be a piano ballad in the club,
Honestly, you succeeded so well. Like, as soon as the song, it's funny because a part of me would be too shy to release that song. It is very vulnerable. Like the
All
way
of my songs are very vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree. But like specifically on the case of this song, I was like, wow, like you're really, yeah, it's just vulnerable. Like everything is so earnest. And I like that because it speaks to me in a way that I find that that's the depth we get as we get older artists.
Right.
We're like, you know what, fuck it. Like, we're just gonna really be vulnerable, put ourselves out there. If you look back at your first songs, you're proving so much. You're trying to prove something to yourself. Things are maybe sometimes overly complicated, complex, layered, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
This one is very minimal.
Yes.
And like the layers are just, everything matters. There's not that many layers. And it's so vulnerable. I gotta say, that's what makes a song great.
Thank you. I mean, and that's what I mean when I say like this record, I think has put me in a place where I feel very free to move in any direction because it is so deeply authentic. I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I'm not trying to fit into any particular genre expectation. I know it's not commercially viable, so who cares, you know? Like,
right. It is freeing.
And in that sense, I've been able to just to tap into that level of earnestness, where it's kind of like, this is what's going on. And tomorrow it might not be going on anymore, but because I was so honest here, I can continue being honest, and that can look like anything moving forward.
I know the answer, I think, but like, what instruments did you play on this record?
I mean, play is so abstract in this.
But it's my understanding that like piano is really the thing that...
My main instrument is keyboard.
Gotcha.
Yeah, of all type.
Right.
So, you know, I write a lot on the piano. I would consider myself, in traditional music terms, to be a pianist and vocalist.
Gotcha.
And that's sort of my domain on this record. In terms of the synths and all the sound design, that's largely Alex. But we are quite hands-on. You know, when I hand things over to him, I'm in the studio and sometimes I'm playing lines on the synth or laying down MIDI for him to extrapolate and work with and whatnot. So,
first of all, I forgot to ask, where was this recorded?
This was recorded here in Montreal at Alex's home studio.
Amazing. Another home record.
Yes.
Perfect. From A to Z, how long did this record take to finish?
Oh, so long.
Okay.
In you know, everyone says that it's your first record that takes the longest, and I was so happy to hear that because my first record also took really long. As Hua Li, my first Peggy Hogan record actually was very fast.
Okay.
But the pandemic, man.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
COVID-19 really put the brakes on for me. I started writing a lot of this record at Banff Center.
Okay.
Where I started the pandemic.
Okay.
Like, I was there, and then I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks, and then they sent us home 2 weeks in because the world was changing rapidly. So I started a lot of the writing and the demoing in 2020.
Gotcha.
And then, you know, I came back to Montreal and I had this body of work that I was still kind of tweaking, moving around, still writing for. But I wanted to kind of give it to Alex at a certain point. But then, you know, we were also scared of seeing each other, and I didn't. It was kind of this thing of like, if I'm gonna be isolated anyway, let me just keep working on this.
Sure.
You know, and I'm gonna keep working on the demos and crafting them, and you know, also making my production skills better.
Right.
And then I'm gonna give him, you know, stuff that's even more fleshed out later. Which eventually happened. We got to a point where we felt comfortable maskless together in a small windowless room.
Right.
And you know, that sort of marked the next chapter of like, okay, now Alex's production is going to come into play.
Right.
Unfortunately, there was a case of a dead hard drive along the way. So that, you know, paused our process for a few months. We were able to recover most of it, but it took a while. And, you know, there's always these starts and stops in a larger project like this.
Not what this song is about, but what does it mean to you, this song?
This song is about remembering, or it's not about this, but what it means to me is This is true. What this song is reflecting on, I should say, is the idea that whatever challenge we're faced with in any given moment is inevitably temporary. And so when I perform this now, it's about something that is no longer relevant to me. Or I shouldn't say it's still relevant. The song is about a very important relationship breaking down.
Right.
When I perform it, I am no longer in the state of grief that I was when I wrote the song.
Right.
But this idea, like, surely in the fall we'll catch a break.
Right.
Right. The idea of, like, with passing time, this is going to feel differently. And that's something that I can return to when I perform it, in the sense of, like, no, I'm not in this moment of grief. But now that this time has passed, there is a shift in mood.
Yeah.
And there's a shift in how I look at the situation.
Beautiful. Let's listen to the other layer. I believe it's this one.
Oh, there's the piano now.
Yeah. So I just want to bring people's attention to the add of the piano on top of the bass and the drums. It's really, it's nice to visit the layers because you don't know what's hidden under the piano. As soon as the piano comes in, that's really all you focus on.
Yes.
It is the main emotion. It's the main driving force. And you can certainly overlook sometimes stuff that's under. And that's one of the things I like about highlighting the work. It's like, hey, you know, it's not just the top line. The top line is that's the good part. That's the easy part. Not the easy part, so to speak, but it's like it's the end result.
Right.
You know, but the foundation. What's one lesson that you learned in the making of this album?
I learned to let things unfold in their own time. There were so many speed bumps in the process of this record, which I never anticipated. I thought 2020 was going to be the best year of my life. I had tons of tour dates. I was on what felt like a very clear upward climb in my music career. I felt like I had a record in me and I wanted it to be out soon. Like, I wanted to follow up Dynasty as quickly as possible and keep building that momentum. And none of that happened. And I also went through an incredible amount of upheaval and change in my life in that intervening time. I mean, I lost my father during COVID. I lost many important relationships to me. I was engaged before this record came.
No way.
I started writing this record. I'm in a brand new relationship now that's much better. The circumstances between me and my best friend that I was obsessed with shifted and changed, and as did so many things through the pandemic, partly because of that, partly because of the isolation and distance, but also, losing a parent is huge, and that kind of upheaval and identity and, just a lot of things. That on top of all of the logistical speed bumps around that I mentioned before, made this record incredibly challenging, actually. I felt frustrated a lot of the time. I wanted it to move forward faster, and I felt stuck a lot, and I felt at times very disconnected from the content of these songs that I had written in 2020 by and large. What's incredible to me is that by the time I submitted this record to the label, which would have been in probably September of last year, finished product, fully mastered, all the artwork, everything. By that time, I had come to love these songs again in a way that I've actually never loved music of my own.
Wow.
That's
deep.
And it did have to do with, like, allowing things to unfold in their own time, and all of those times I felt frustrated and I wanted to push the process forward. When I was able to let go and let things happen and let the songs evolve in their own way, and be open also to, you know, changing up the lyrics, changing up the melodies in order to reflect better where I'm at now.
That's hard to do when you're mixing, I don't want to say old, but, you know, older songs and a newer state. I find that often that's a dangerous territory to thread.
Yes.
Did you have that experience as well?
This was the most fraught record I've ever made, truly. I really, you know, I went from times of wanting to throw it all out and start over. And, you know, I don't even know why I tenaciously wanted to finish these songs. But that process in and of itself felt important to me.
Sure.
You know, I don't know why, but it felt very important to like do it in this way, even if it wasn't working well. You know, even if my collaboration with Alex was like not the way I wanted it, or, you know, the timing wasn't the way I wanted it, or, you know, like this song just isn't fitting in right with the other ones or whatever. Like I felt very almost crazily committed to doing it. And I was getting so much feedback of like, you know, this isn't really your sound anymore, and I see you interested in this other stuff, and why don't you explore this? And even my collaborations with Aisha and Koreatown Acid along the way, I was kind of moving into where I see the future of my project going.
So what made you decide to publish this record? What, like, all that strength and all those doubts and all those things that are working against you, what made you finish it and put it out? In a nutshell, you know?
I think I just had to, you know? Sometimes there's no reason to what compels us.
You just had that feeling inside you.
I felt that it was very important also as maybe a spiritual exercise to connect that person I was when I wrote these songs to who I was becoming.
Right.
And that's part of what made it so fraught, is that I was in such a time of growth and upheaval and participating in recovery and just learning to hold myself and my life in a new light. It felt very important to bring that version of myself along. Like I couldn't creatively abandon that person.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate you saying that. I think about those things. You know, I'm working on some songs too that are a little older, and what you just said really resonates with me, where it's like, I feel I don't want to let go of that, Sasha. I want to finish it.
Right.
Put it out there, you know, it matters to me. It's
a way to introduce that person to who you are now.
You know what? I never saw it like that, and I'm going to think about that for sure. Thank you. One last stem. I believe this is just the piano and your vocals. I'm not sure.
How exposing. Talk about vulnerable.
No matter what we mute and piece together, it all sounds like a banger. I love doing that, mixing and matching those things. When you're writing music by yourself, I assume it's mostly how you do it when you're writing your songs. What's your biggest challenge? What's your biggest creative challenge? Do you have a hard time going into, because if I'm understanding this correctly, you have a very good notion of a music theory, your degrees, what makes a verse, what makes a chorus. So I'm assuming that's not so much of a big challenge for you.
No, in fact, I like to try and forget as much of that stuff as I can.
So I didn't mean to interrupt that answer. Like, what then is your biggest challenge when you're writing music?
I struggle with teasing out the muse to finish.
What do you mean by that?
There's very much a seed of like divine intervention. I find a lot of the times where I'm starting something. Um, I do a lot of kind of writing by exercise in the sense of when I sit down to write, I often don't have an idea of the song I'm going to write.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It just happens.
right. It comes from what I'm playing on the piano in that moment, or if I'm on a synth, like what sound I'm drawn to, and these things kind of cascade into something that feels compelling for me
More tangible.
to tell a story over. You
Mhm.
know, where the top line comes in.
Right.
That always feels like a moment of divine intervention,
Wow.
where it's sort of like, you know, I'm doing something that triggers something else, and then here's the mood, and then that connects to here's a story that someone told me recently, and how can I, well, what if I was in their shoes, and
Right.
like
Yeah.
it
All
becomes
that.
this very much a cascading thing that I feel like has very little to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of me getting out of the way.
Sure. You're just a vessel, so to speak, of
Yes.
something.
However, you can't finish things as a vessel.
That's
It's
very true.
It's very rare that you get to be a vessel for a whole song.
Mhm.
I have
You're right.
sometimes in my life enjoyed floating on that stream
Mm-hmm.
for long enough to get all the way through something. But usually there comes a time where it's like, okay, now this idea is crystallizing and I have to add more information that is intentional.
Yes.
Otherwise, it becomes just,
just an idea.
Incoherent channeling.
You're
you
right.
know?
You're right.
So that can be challenging for me.
Mhm.
I write from top to bottom a lot, in the sense of like I'll start with like first verse and then I'll figure out the chorus and then second verse and
Really?
yes, which is, I know, controversial and strange.
No, that's great. Ugh.
That being said, second verses can be very challenging for me
Right.
because I'm revisiting something where I was struck by the divine,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm like, okay, here's me
Yeah, sure.
trying to explain this now.
Here is now a conscious attempt.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Before we play the demo, I just want to ask you, again, taking into consideration how hard all of this is, from inception to distribution to playing a show to all that.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most fun part of this whole adventure for you?
Definitely playing live.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. So playing live is the goal, so to speak.
I mean, the greater goal is to like influence culture in such a profound way that everyone will remember me forever, and
Sure.
my ideas will change society, and I will be looked to as a beacon of influence. Generations down the road, I'll still be interviewed because of my insightful and deep understanding of the impact of culture on society. But
I mean, I want that for you. Don't get me wrong. I want that for you, and I want to be there for you when that happens. Absolutely.
But yes, the short-term goal is to get on stage as much as possible.
That's really cool, man. I find that like it's very difficult for me to imagine playing on stage. Like, it's not my most fun part. So many parameters can go wrong. When you play live, do you just sing or do you play piano as well?
Very rarely do I bring keys on stage now.
Gotcha.
I used to bring them out more.
Okay.
And I think that had to do more with me. I was going to say it's very performative. It's all performative when you're performing. I felt a great need to prove to people, demonstrate physically that I was more than just a vocalist.
Mm-hmm.
I really had a chip on my shoulder around that, where I was like, I feel like people don't give me enough credit as a musician if I just come out and sing these songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care about that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I know that oftentimes if people see Alex and I perform, the assumption will be, oh, here's a girl singer and this is the mastermind producer behind it all.
Yeah.
Whatever. If
Yeah.
that's your takeaway, fine, you're wrong, you know? But I used to have a huge hang up around like, I need to show people that I have these skills.
Well, in the context of what you just said,
Mm.
that makes sense.
Right.
I just had another question pop into my mind that I swear I'm going to play the demo after this. You know, it's this need for love and for acceptance, playing live and making music and
Yes.
all that stuff.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to denigrate anybody or you or me. Like, we are only human beings and we want validation and we seek love and validation.
Mm-hmm.
However, as I get older, that need is lessened for me. It has affected my desire to have a career in music. Because I feel like, well, this is a lot of work for validation.
Right.
So my reasons and my motivation has really changed. As you get older as well, have you come across this thought or?
Yes. This is one of the things that my father said to me that I think changed my life. And he used to give me a lot of advice and opinions about music. And I rightfully think he was wrong about a lot of stuff. But he cared a lot. And I just, came from a different time. So it was different.
Right.
I was talking to him one time about, I've always loved performing, but it wasn't always as joyous for me as it is now because I was hypercritical. And that's partly his fault.
Right.
That's partly my mother's fault.
That's
it's
our
partly the
for
fault
sure.
of my music educators.
That's how we're raised, though.
Yes.
Performance, performance, performance.
I would leave the stage. I've always been a good performer. I've been lucky to be on the stage since I was 4. You know, I have a lot of experience. But I would often leave dejected. No matter how the show went, there would always be something where I was like, I didn't sing that part right, or, oh, I forgot that word, or I could have done this, or why did I move like that, or, and having so much experience, you have more things to be critical of.
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
right.
You have the knowledge of what to criticize.
You're right.
So what really changed my perspective on this was my father told me one time I was sharing with him this kind of critical voice that made performing challenging. And he told me that I was thinking about it the wrong way because as a musician, I offer something that is very special, which is that I get to present to people organized sound that impacts their bodies and their emotions in a certain light. And when I do that, it's an act of love. So if I'm thinking about myself in that moment, I'm not giving strength to that act of love. I'm being irresponsible, actually, with my gift. We don't give gifts to feel good about ourselves, or we shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah. To your point about validation, yes, I think all performing artists seek some amount of validation and love from the audience. That's part of the human condition.
Yeah.
But even on an individual basis, when we seek love between individuals, it's off-putting. If I come up to you and I'm like, Sasha, like, oh, you're looking so great today, like, da-da-da, like, oh, I saw you were working on this. That's so cool. Like, do you think I could come too? And like, oh, I just like love being your friend. You'd be like, wow, this person's like so inauthentic and is clearly looking for, like, they want to take something
from me. Yeah.
Whereas if I come to you with an open heart and I come to you with a loving gift, I want to know about you. I want to connect with you. That's actually what will give me the validation that I naturally seek as a person, right?
Intention
Yes.
makes the difference.
So when I give the audience the type of love I can give, which is musical, this is the language that I'm most well-versed in. If I can give them that gift authentically, openly, and not focusing on myself, not focusing on I want their validation. I want
Mm-hmm.
them to love
Mm-hmm.
me. Then they will.
Right.
Then I can leave the stage feeling whole. I've had that interaction that I seek. I can only have that interaction if I'm not motivated by the validation.
So it's basically that you have had those thoughts and you have recognized that within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then what has changed is that your self-awareness on that subject has led you to understand that it's like basically, as you just said, it's giving. It's about giving. And when you do that, you're not compromising your integrity
Yes.
about wanting and needing that validation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I really feel that that's kind of where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that has changed for me is that I think I don't want to have a conventional career anymore.
Mm.
And that has freed me
Mm-hmm.
from any of those expectations.
Yes.
And now whenever I do something, it comes from a place, it doesn't come from that place of seeking validation.
Mm.
I got to tell you, that's been one of the best experiences of my life.
Yes. And, I think it's interesting what you say that it's sort of demotivating in this light. I think I've felt that way as well in terms of like, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean,
But it's about finding that greater point.
You're
right?
absolutely
Where
right.
it's like, no, the point is to connect.
mhm,
The point is not X number of Instagram followers and I have,
you're right.
like a viral TikTok and I have like a tens of thousands of Spotify monthly listeners.
You're right.
If I had, I love going on my Spotify for Artists Live. And when I see like one person listening, I'm like, I love you.
Absolutely.
Whoever you are out there,
Absolutely.
you are so, I can't believe you're listening to my song right now.
I got to be honest, that is their best feature.
The live listeners.
I'm just going to be honest about that. Spotify for Artists can suck it, but like that live listener thing, it's the best.
Yes. But it means more to me when there's one than when there's more. For some reason, that one person in the whole world.
Well, it makes it that much more
I'm like,
special.
oh, you're so
Sure.
sweet.
I noticed what you were saying about being giving and that focus changing. I was listening to Radiohead, their 2016 record, their latest record.
Mhm.
It's a song, it's called Daydreaming, and it's about we are just happy to serve you.
Yes, I love this song.
And that's what he was referring to. And he's aging now. He's I think he's 56 because I know everything about them. And I just thought that, that's my answer.
Uh-huh.
That's the motivation. It echoes exactly what you're saying. There comes a beautiful point in your life if you're really open and your heart's open, you realize that this is about everybody else as much as it's about your pleasure.
Yes. And our value comes from our acts of service in many ways.
You're right.
You're
right.
Ultimately speaking, yes, there's whatever like social capital, and whatnot.
We are beholden to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the people that really matter to you in your life, they're the ones that generously, lovingly serve you in your growth, in who you are as a person, without sacrificing themselves. That's very important.
Yeah, their integrity is...
People who sacrifice themselves are also struggling.
Yeah.
But if they're able to maintain that sense of core self and are able to be in service to their community without damaging themselves, that's beautiful. That is, I think, the essence of humanity.
You're right. It's what else is there to aspire to that matters as much as that? Let's play that demo. It's very subtle, but that rhythm, it changes everything. I don't want to play the whole thing because I don't want to give up the song too much. Wrapping up before we go. What advice would you give to your younger self as an artist?
Oh, people love to ask this.
I feel that it's, for me, it's very telling because like you have the hindsight of your whole life,
I feel like I often say the same thing, which is just to be patient.
Fair enough.
in youth, there's so much. Well, okay, so you know how time speeds up as you get older,
Hmm.
or the perception of time, I should say. It doesn't literally, but
Yes, in a metaphysical way.
yes.
Yes,
You know, in that sense of like, if you're 5, like you've only been on the planet for 5 years, every year is like a bigger part of
an
your life,
eternity.
et
Yeah,
cetera, et cetera. You know, so everyone's familiar with this concept,
Mm.
both experientially and
absolutely.
yes. So I think that is it's one of the great tragedies of youth
Hmm.
that time is experienced incorrectly. I shouldn't say incorrectly.
No, no, I know
That's
what you mean. I
valid,
know what you
but
mean.
when
Yeah,
you have more time on the planet and a year is so fast, uh, it makes you realize that like nothing is that urgent.
yeah.
You know, even when you're moments away from death, nothing is that urgent.
Mm.
And I struggled so much as a young artist because I felt a great deal of urgency, and I felt that I hadn't accomplished enough, and I felt, you know, directionless in many ways. And as we've alluded to, my life has amounted to what it is today because I've had 10,000 jobs in the music
Yeah.
industry. And now I know what it is I actually like to do in this industry and the kind of person I want to be and the voice I want to have.
Our experiences are compounding and they shape. Yeah,
Hmm.
sure.
So, yeah, I wish I could have enjoyed the ride more when I was younger. And I had more gratitude and all of that stuff. At the same time, I don't wish that anything would change.
Yeah, it is what it is for
Well,
sure.
you know,
For sure.
I'm a big Star Trek fan. It's the this is me being truly vulnerable with
Let's
you.
go.
I love Next Generation
Okay.
and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Those 3, that era of the 90s into the early noughties of the Star Trek empire.
Wow.
It's shaped me deeply as a person, and
Wow.
they deal with the idea of the nonlinear nature of time a
Mhm.
lot. This was like a huge theme in these shows. Uh, so there's always this question of kind of like protecting, you know, there's certain space-time rules that you can't break
Mhm.
because anything that you do in the future or the past can impact the present moment,
Sure.
right? So I think about that a lot when I get asked this question, which does come up a lot in interviews. Because it's kind of like, I don't know, I almost don't want to give advice to my younger self
Mhm.
because of what
Mhm.
are the implications on the space-time continuum?
You know what? You know what? That is the answer. I agree with you. That is the answer. Say no more. You know what? I'm not going to ask this question no more. I got to be considerate of the space-time continuum implications of my question, and I feel that that's just being disrespectful if I'm being honest right now. Thank you for bringing that up to me. You know what? Shit, we're done.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful
You know
time.
what? And here ends my TED Talk. I wanna give people, obviously, can you plug what's coming out? What are you up to? You told me that you're leaving on tour. Your record's coming out soon. Can you
Yes.
tell me?
So do I talk about this to talk about space-time? Do we treat this moment in time as the future when this comes out? Or do we treat this moment of time as the present, which will then be a marker of the past?
You're right. You're right. I think that we're gonna talk about this as if I believe your record will have come out when this comes out. I believe your record comes out on the 25th.
27th of March,
27th. I knew that.
2024.
I knew that.
The record is called Ripe Fruit Falls, but not in your mouth.
What an amazing title, by the way. When you're leaving on tour soon.
I am.
Tell me about this.
I am leaving on tour on April 4th.
Yep.
I'm the support act for Land of Talk.
Right.
It's very meaningful to me because of all of what I said earlier about discovering Milan Montreal music through
Right.
the unicorns and very important artists like Land of Talk that were part of that scene. So it feels very full circle to get to open for them.
Amazing. I wish I could. Do you have Montreal dates?
Yes, April 5th.
Oh,
You'll have to come.
I'm there.
Yes.
I'm there. Sold.
Soterrania.
Okay.
It's the basement of Sala. And
Done.
I'm also doing an after party at Bar Le Système.
Let's
do
go.
like a live hybrid DJ set.
Done. I
My
love that
friend
place.
Cindy Ayo from Toronto is coming out as well to support me with some DJ sets that night. And the legendary, unstoppable, it's gotta be Shashu.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
be closing out the
There
night.
you go. Okay, well, I know everybody there then.
Yes.
And one last thing is, can you give us your Instagram handle?
Yes, at Hua Li Graham, HUALI Graham.
I want to remind everybody again to like and subscribe to the podcast, to follow the artists on Spotify as well, on Apple Music, on YouTube, because those things matter. And Tidal. They make a difference. And if you really want to support us, all that information is in the description of the episodes, wherever you are listening to this episode.
Buy my physical LP, record stores around the world, online, via my Bandcamp or the Nextdoor Records web store. That is the best way to support me. And buy my merch and support Sasha and all he does, because he's a force.
Fais-le pour la culture. Have a good day, guys.